Wait, am I a Republican now? That's the legitimate question I've been asking myself all day. Today is November 6th, 2024. It was official this morning when I woke up. Yes, Trump has won the election, and I voted for him, and he won. Now, that's interesting for me because this marks the first time in 20 years that I've voted for someone who actually got elected president. I'm horrible about voting for the person who actually gets elected. But this time around, I voted for him, and he won. And I think it's interesting because I've had this sense of, I don't even want to call it a sense of peace. I want to call it a sense of like a switch has flipped. Like I have this identity of, I feel like I'm a Republican now. And I think that's interesting because I really haven't felt that way before. I've always identified as non-political in college, especially libertarian. But I think over the years, what's happened is we've seen the middle move. Well, I would say ultimately what we've seen is when we can look back to even Obama's first term, he actually was against gay marriage. In his second term, then, now he's for it. But what we see is collectively, the goalpost, or however you want to word it, for what counts as the middle has changed. So like for me specifically, I'm the kind of person who I have personal moral standards that I live by, but that doesn't necessarily mean I hold other people accountable to those same standards. So therefore, when it comes to something like gay marriage, well, I never had a problem with it because for me, marriage is a spiritual concept. It's not about a legal concept as seen in the eyes of the government. So I never had a problem with that, for example. But that's just one little example of how when we look at all these things, culturally, the United States has changed. And these things that used to be very Democratic or very Republican, they've kind of like mixed together. And yeah, there are certain things still on the extremes, but for the most part, now we're seeing that a Republican they look a little bit different than before. And so as I woke up today, I thought, I'm actually proud that I voted for Trump. I actually feel good about that. And why is that? So I took some notes here. And here's ultimately, I think, what it was for me. I've always looked for balance. I've always looked for what's the closest thing to the middle as I could find. And I feel that Trump is the closest thing there is to the middle, and in a way that makes me feel comfortable. But I couldn't feel that way with the Democratic Party. I just could not, especially because I felt Trump had more of a focus on the economy. And let's keep in mind, I'm a hardworking, loyal husband and father. And I'll make other videos about that, but I felt that's not a demographic that was celebrated by the other side. That's its own videos. But for me specifically, I'm looking for that sense of balance. And the thing is, I'm educated, okay? There's a stereotype that uneducated people are voting for Trump or they're ashamed to admit they're voting for Trump if they are. But ultimately, I am educated. So it's not a concept that I'm this racist, bigoted person. And I feel that this is all kind of built into it. And I'm gonna keep bringing this up. What is one of the demographics that helped Trump get elected in 2024? Hispanic men. That tells you that no matter what we're told that Trump is this racist bigot of a person, well, if Hispanic men helped get him elected, and that was one of the demographics that the Democrats were depending on, and they didn't get it, but they specifically chose to vote for Trump instead, there's something to be said about that. That people who value hard work and loyalty to family, that I think that within itself is starting to be what would be a modern Republican. Okay, so like, for example, are you a hardworking person who contributes to society and takes care of your family and you're faithful to them and you're looking for the well-being of them? And ultimately, you have your own moral convictions, but you don't really need to force that on to someone else. I mean, I think one of the things too that we're seeing is, I think that in modern society, I feel, despite what we're told in left-wing media, is that discrimination isn't quite as prevalent as it used to be. You can be gay now and not be discriminated against. You can be minority and not be discriminated against. Like, you can have a really good life here in the United States and be of whatever minority status, and still, compared to 40 years ago or whatever it was, or even compared to 30 years ago, things are a lot different. So I think it's outdated to think that because you're a minority, you're automatically being discriminated against. If anything, if you're a minority status, you're probably celebrated so much because the left side wants to make a hero out of you. But I think a lot of people in minority status are thinking, yeah, but I also care about the economy too. And I also care about someone who seems to be like they're competently in charge of this and not necessarily part of the system. I think what we're seeing is more of a melting pot where a guy like me who would maybe otherwise seem like, oh, here's another white guy. Of course he's a Republican, another white guy. But thing is, I'm not that far removed from people who are demographically the same. Again, hardworking, they have a strong moral code, they're loyal to their family, and they want to see what's best, especially as it relates to the economy. And it's this concept that we work hard and we want to see the results of that, and we don't want to feel like the government has to take care of us and ultimately pay other people or reward other people who aren't working as hard as we are. And I think minority status can relate to that in the same way that a guy like me can as well. So I think what we're seeing now, what this election has proven, is that a Republican looks different than it used to. I think this specific election proved that. Again, the fact that one of the demographics that won it was Hispanic males tells us a lot about that concept. That as far as this stereotype of an ignorant, racist white man who wants to oppress other people and discriminate against others and it hates people. No, I mean, that's not how I grew up. I grew up here in Alabama, but I was born in 81. But the way I grew up, I on my own was not racist and looking down on people for the race or whatever it was like that. Like that's a foreign concept. I was taught that was the South's history. But as far as me ever having those feelings, no, it's not something I can relate to. And I feel that the left side has broadcasted it, that ultimately Republicans and racists are exactly one and the same. But ultimately, I feel that because of Hispanic men helping to swing this vote, I think that discredits that concept. I would love to hear what you have to say here in the comments below.